When talking about class consciousness and the awareness your usual worker has about their lives in capitalism, I always seem to go back to a model of mine I've created that I like to call the 3 stages of class consciousness. Let me explain. I believe that class consciousness is not a binary thing. The understanding we call class consciousness is a spectrum that usually happens in 3 stages. They are noticing the problem, pointing out the problem, and lastly, realizing the solution. As I said, stage 1 is about noticing the problem. The people on this stage usually consider themselves non- or apolitical, the type of people who will say, "It sucks, but it's the best we've got," or "It sucks, but that's how things are." They are at least somewhat aware that their work is taking advantage of them or making them miserable, that work is draining, the nature of it, the hours, how you're treated on the job by customers and managers, the pay, etc., etc. They're aware that scams, marketing schemes, manipulative advertising, and the like somewhat exist in society, but don't look too heavily at these problems. Rather, they are simply aware these things exist and are not interested in looking further. Stage 2 goes a little further. The people in this group are likely to say that capitalism sucks, but it's the best we've got. Not all people at this stage will believe this to a T, but they are aware of the problem and can correctly determine that it's capitalism. This can range from libertarians who defend the system to progressives who want to have more government programs but still keep capitalism around. The thing that keeps them in common is that they rather pin the flaws of capitalism on human greed, lack of government programs, or corporatism instead of capitalism's inherent flaws. They still do not know the solution to the problem they notice and can point out. This is where we get to stage 3, or full class consciousness. These people are likely to say, capitalism sucks, and we deserve better. They're able to notice the problem, correctly point out that it's capitalism, and ascertain that the solution is a post-capitalist economy such as socialism, mutualism, communism, and the like. Now, the context in which I usually bring this model up is in conversations about revolution and what politics of the populace will have to be for one to succeed. Many usually argue that most Americans lack class consciousness. However, I'd argue that many of them lie on the stage 1 part of this spectrum. They have a fleeting, light experience with class consciousness. This, I'd argue, is actually pretty innate to the experience one has in capitalism since its flaws are constant and its internal contradictions ever-present. Look at the French Revolution, for instance. In my summary of Richard Wolff's talk, Socialism for Dummies, I stress the historical lesson he teaches about what happened after the revolution. French revolutionaries have a bloody overthrow of feudalism to rein in capitalism, and after living under capitalism for a while, they found out that the capitalism they reigned in was not delivering on the promises of the revolution: liberty, equality, and fraternity. They came, organically, to the same beginning stages of class consciousness that many Americans have today. It's how popular socialist thought was birthed. As I said before, a lot of Americans lie in this light category of class consciousness. Recently, many factors have been pushing people along these stages, sowing the seeds for revolution. Record unemployment and poor treatment of workers during the pandemic has led more people to feel that they've been duped. It's also not uncommon that those who are depressed, including the online culture of doomers, will often realize that their job is part of the reason their lives are so miserable. So, if most Americans really do have some form of class consciousness, how strong and commonplace does it need to be for a revolution? Well, this is debatable. My argument is that defining class consciousness simply around being an anti-capitalist or having read theory is a bit disingenuous. It leads some people, like authoritarian communists, to argue based on this loose definition that a majority of populations don't have class consciousness and that a vanguard party must be established by the well-educated, which of course they get to define, to better educate the masses and rein in revolution. This is a poor way of attacking the problem. Putting aside that this is flat-out elitist, it also sacrifices the morals of communists for the sake of the revolution. Post-capitalist systems focus on liberty and volunteerism. You volunteer your time for the greater good of the community, and you're not forced to participate at threat of starvation or not having the means to live. So why should we use these very methods we criticize under capitalism on the general working class? We shouldn't. And especially in a country like America that has very heavy anti-authoritarian sentiments, it would be actively counterproductive. Rather, we need to work with the majority of people who are currently in the earlier stages of class consciousness, and through different experiences, help them along to later stages. This can be as simple as having conversations with people in prior stages, or notifying them of protest movements such as BLM, eviction protests, and mutual aid organizations. When introduced to groups of people who have acted on their feelings of there being something wrong with society, you allow them to realize something can be done about these problems, and that action can and is being made. Having many people in society be at the earlier stages of class consciousness is not a bad thing by any means. It gives those people an opportunity and openness to learning about the things that lead others to be at higher stages of class consciousness. It's obviously a lot harder to say that there is a problem and then not point it out if you've been to protests about a problem or meetings and talks about the issue. Whether this process will happen to most people before or after radical societal changes, i.e. a revolution, is up for debate. Usually, stable revolutions will loosely recreate the previous society, but without capitalists, giving the working class the ability to manage their own workplaces in co-ops instead of hierarchical structures. So, if they don't move to stages 2 and 3 before the revolution, they certainly can after they experience what working conditions without a capitalist are like. We buy ourselves plenty of time with this strategy to help people realize that these shifts in economical structure would lead to a better society precisely due to a practice of negative utilitarianism, which focuses on removing the main issue instead of trying to find ways to ignore it or put band-aids over it. It makes it harder for those at, for instance, stage 2 to ignore inherent problems and contradictions, especially when we get rid of the core problem. So then, this concept we call class consciousness needs to be considered, as most politics are, as a diverse spectrum. This understanding of different phases of class consciousness should help us better educate those who have basic understandings to attain more complex understandings of the ideas they already have themselves.